Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Up first, we've got no watches, warnings, or advisories out, so there's no hazardous weather graphic today anywhere for the next day or so. So we'll start out with the satellite imagery, and you can see a band right through here dissipating. That's separating the colder air back here to the north and northeast from somewhat milder air here to the southwest. In association with this system, pushing east and northeast, kind of sharing a little bit right through here, the wind flow aloft coming up and then over off to the southeast. And this area here, winds aloft, pushing off to the north. So that's weakening this portion of the system, but holding together pretty good back to the west here. And actually behind the front, you can see some clearing there over the central Aleutians, and then back here, that grayish shaded cloud area there, that's the colder air coming down out of the Russian Far East in across the western Bering Sea and the Aleutians there with snow showers back from Shimi and Attu right up to the coastline. And then this moisture and areas of snow spreading northward here over the Bering Sea with light snow all the way up to the Seward Peninsula during the day today, Saturday by midday into Nome. Otherwise, got a disturbance here clipping the eastern Arctic coast. A little bit of a flurry condition going on up there. Kind of a trough digging southward here across the Northwest Territories. And that's going to be affecting the southeast coast here with some snow over the southern areas for the next 24 hours or so. And then we've got lots of clearing here occurring south central Alaska, Prince William Sound, right up into the Kuskokwim Valley areas. Start picking up some clouds there toward the Alaska Range, but still areas of sunshine over the Copper River Basin and up into the Tanana Valley. Then you start picking up the clouds again as you head north toward that upper level trough that's dropping down from the north up there. And rolling this again, you can see over the southeast coast, clouds down in through here, kind of enhancing as this trough comes southward. So there was areas of light rain, light snow, mainly over the southern areas there with clouds developing back to the north. And then also you can see clouds off the coast here associated with a weak surface low just off to the west there. But for today, rain and snow falling across the southern areas there, light amounts, and not too much on up to the north there. Areas of sunshine here across southern Alaska. Kenai Peninsula actually roughly around Kodiak Island. They did pick up a few more clouds there, especially over towards Shelikof Strait. But from there northward, very nice day today into the portions of the Kuskokwim Valley, and then that system out to the west, kicking the winds up here anywhere from 20 gusts, maybe as high as 40 miles an hour, right along the coastline there, but the strongest winds offshore there coming across the Pribilofs. Windy, wet day there with rain and snow falling the entire day there at St. Paul and St. George, and that pattern extends down to the Alaska Peninsula, mostly in the form of rain down through here along the Alaska Peninsula back toward the eastern Aleutians. And then that snowfall levels crash here as those northwest winds pull that colder air southeastward. And so we're looking at snow showers all the way down to sea level there out over the western Aleutians and the Bering Sea. And for tonight, that low drifts northward a little bit, not too fast. The front rotates up to off the coast here, right across the Alaska Peninsula. So looking for rain and snow here for the Bristol Bay area, mostly rain for the Alaska Peninsula on out to about Unalaska. It'll be on the back edge there associated with this trough. And it'll be definitely more showery through here, and then those will diminish there as that rotates eastward. And then some scattered rain and snow showers over the central Aleutians, back to the northwest here, mostly snow showers falling with an area of mixed precipitation right through there near the low center, and then onto the east there. So whatever falls up along the northern Bristol Bay coast, say King Salmon, Dillingham to Togiak, on up to Macoriac, that'll be in the form of snow. But the heavier snow will be off to the west, just clipping western St. Lawrence Island there, Just otherwise some clouds and clear skies for the most part. There'll be some patchy areas of clouds, but mostly clear and definitely dry all the way from the Arctic coast southward here, again into the northern Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound areas. Start to pick up maybe an increase in the clouds here from Fognak Island into southern Cook Inlet, but staying pretty good eastward here into the northern Panhandle. Colder temperatures coming southward here, so the winds on the increase there for northern Link Canal, outflow winds, Arctic air coming in, gravity flow type of thing, and pick up some moisture with this system just to the south. You'll be seeing periods of snow down over the southern southeast coast tonight. Some areas could be mixed with rain, Prince of Wales Island, and those areas, the Dixon entrance. And then for tomorrow, see, this system continues to push up to the northeast, so we've got roughly rain and snow here, Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula rain. Kodiak Island definitely in the rain there, those southeast winds. And some of that moisture will be spreading northward, definitely during the day tomorrow, throughout the day. Celine's visibility is coming down across south central Alaska into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. And it looks like some rain and snow spreading up the southern part of the Kenai Peninsula, eventually getting into western Prince William Sound. Also northward along the western Alaska Range. But just to the north, northern Sitna Valley on up into the interior. Very nice day coming up there for tomorrow here with sunshine and not too bad on the wind. Maybe some areas picking up a little bit of wind, higher elevations for sure. And fair skies, colder temperatures into the northern southeast coast, and holding on to that rain and snow shower threat over the southern areas at least through tomorrow. Out to the west, we've got the low pressure area there pulling up just west of the Pribilofs. Cold air coming southeastward again, same story with the lower snowfall levels, more showery conditions out there, and pretty gusty winds coming around that low center there, clipping the Aleutians, and also pretty windy day here across the southwest coast there, especially in advance of that front on down into Kodiak Island. And the outlook for Monday, still have this low pressure area, really not moving a whole lot, kind of drifting up toward the southwest coast. Lots of snow showers there, enough cold air wrapped in around that, snowfall levels down near sea level. And then you get mixed here toward the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. We have this breakaway low coming up into the Gulf of Alaska here, and that will keep it definitely unsettled along the North Gulf Coast with snow or rain and snow mixed, depending on where you are here. And that front will slide into the southeast coast, bringing a shot of snow in later tomorrow night and into Monday, possibly mixing with rain, especially along the coast there from Sitka on down to Dixon Entrance. But to the east there, kind of up in the air how much snow you'll get before it changes over to rain. Definitely will be in the form of snow over the northern southeast coast, and mostly clear and cold. Temperatures remain up here over the, well, from the Alaska Range, Tanana Valley areas all the way up to the Arctic coast. And speaking of temperatures, lows tonight will be in the 20s here for the southeast coast, and again 5 to 10 below zero, Copper River Basin to 15 below possibly here up over the Yukon Flats to Arctic Village, maybe even the Arctic coast. Milder here to the southwest. You got single numbers warming into the teens, and then the lower to mid 20s out toward the coastline, near 20 for Savunga. And out in the Aleutians, lows mostly near or a little below freezing, except for the Pribilofs up into the lower 30s. And the highs tomorrow staying well below zero up here over the northeast interior, that cold air coming southward, and kind of chilly there for the Panhandle, 20s to lower 30s, and then the lows in the lower 20s here for the southeast coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tomorrow morning shows IFR here approaching the southwest coast, right along areas of it there, Nunivak Island, Kipnuk, on down to Cape Newenham, and then up into Togiak Bay and cutting across northeast Bristol Bay. More enhanced here on the southeast side of the Alaska, or the Aleutian Range here in the peninsula, slipping on up to Kodiak Island. Lots of VFR holding over the interior with IFR, central eastern Arctic coast, marginal VFR all out to the west, and looks like some marginal VFR and even IFR showing up over the southern southeast coast. And then for tomorrow afternoon, that's gone, burns off with VFR way out into the Gulf of Alaska, and then southeasterly flow slipping some moisture up or some marginal VFR up into western Prince William Sound, even possible IFR there at the Kenai Peninsula, and deteriorating conditions here, mostly on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, hitting the pass up there around Rainy Pass later in the afternoon. VFR over the interior, no change up there on the Arctic coast. And not much change here along the southwest coast. IFR up to about St. Lawrence Island, north of the Pribilofs now with marginal VFR everywhere else. Outlook for Monday morning. IFR a little bit farther to the west up here, possibly, well, into the Wainwright, but not quite reaching Point Lay. VFR North Slope Brooks Range in across all of the eastern interior here, but again, becoming a little more widespread with that continued southeasterly flow. So IFR a little more extensive up the east side of the Kenai Peninsula into western Prince William Sound, and also along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range area, with IFR extending all along the southwest coast, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, right up toward the Strait and the southern Seward Peninsula. Marginal VFR, Alaska Peninsula, Pribilofs, all of the Aleutians in the Bering Sea with VFR here for the southeast coast. And for the outlook in the afternoon, that takes a dramatic change from VFR to IFR here for the Panhandle, all along the North Gulf Coast there, into Prince William Sound, up to the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, downsloping VFR areas from Anchor Point on up into the Matanuska Valley there with IFR along the Alaska Range east side, marginal VFR back to the west. Less IFR out here along the coast now, but just south of St. Lawrence Island. Really not much change for the central and eastern Arctic coastal areas with VFR over the North Slope. And for passes, both Anigan and Anatuvik, VFR tomorrow once again, with Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR gradually becoming marginal on the eastern entrance of both passes, and that trend for rainy much later in the day and not quite as extensive, but look for that eastern approach to go marginal late in the afternoon. Windy though, VFR. And Isabel as well, VFR, no change from Antasta, another VFR day there as well. And for Tanita also. Portage though, starting out VFR, becoming IFR during the latter part of the afternoon. Chilkoot and White, VFR, freezing levels, 2,000 feet here up over the Alaska Peninsula to around or near just south of Sitkinak, and at the surface along the North Gulf Coast, the Panhandle, out into the central Bering Sea up to about St. Matthew Island. Icing with all the moisture coming in, could be some widespread moderate here, roughly Kodiak Island up along Hansing along the Aleutian Range, possibly the Kilbrook-Auckland Mountain areas, otherwise light to very isolated moderate here in the remainder of the shaded area across all southwest Alaska, and that working northward there in the Kenai Peninsula. For the jet stream, looking at 33,000 feet tomorrow, here's that low pressure area pushing its way eastward here, kind of pinching off the ridging that's been across the area there with this high center starting to pull up to the north a little bit. But a pretty good jet now breaking through, has broke through or will break through right across the Gulf of Alaska out of the southwest there at the split right through here. And then northerly flow holding steady right along the border there, about 60 to 50 knots here, keeping the chilly air in over the Yukon and the eastern and northern interior areas. For 9,000 feet, pretty good low there near the Pribilof Islands, 25 to 35 knot northwesterlies there, turning westerly for the Aleutians, and then southeasterlies 25 to 35 knots here, 20 to 35 across the southwest interior, lighter under the ridge axis to the east, and 3,000 feet, 25 to 30, 35 knots, maybe besides 45 knots there for Kachemak Bay. Easterlies 20 for the Arctic coast, light through the interior, all the way down to the Panhandle. Stronger winds out west. Turbulence-wise, look for some moderate chop here, especially for smaller aircraft from the central interior, right up the northwest coast there to Point Hope. Also from the Barren Islands, Kachemak Bay, across the Kuskokwim Valley and eastern Norton Sound, southwest coast, and the central Aleutians with marginal VFR, or smooth sailing everywhere else.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms. Why they occurred, the distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region, the rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense and what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data from numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. There are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. Well, one of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to today's sea ice analysis. Showing a little bit of a retreat here with those southerly winds we've had in over the area there, especially back here in Nunivak Island on down into Bristol Bay and even up here in towards St. Lawrence Island. But tomorrow the winds will become a little more easterly up through here, and we'll lose those southerly winds. So that'll leave the area from Nunivak Island into Bristol Bay the most vulnerable to seeing any further reduction in the sea ice. Moving on to the coastal water forecast here for the southeast coast over the southern inside waters. Northwest at 10, pretty light winds there with seas at 2 feet. Colder air coming southward, so 30-knot northerlies with higher gusts there for Lynn Canal, seas up to about 6 feet. Otherwise, northeast 20 for Stevens Passage. And we've got easterlies at 15 here, picking up to 20 to 25 knots. So there's a small craft advisories up on the north coast with those easterly winds, seas 5 to 6 feet. And for the outlook on Monday, small craft advisories continue here. Northern Lynn Canal with some higher gusts, but only 15 out of the northeast there for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait turning southeast at about 20 knots, while we've got southwesterly 25-knot winds here for the south coast, and then minimum gales along areas of the north coast there from the east-southeast, 30 to 35 knots with seas as high as 13 feet. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, east 20 knots, seas 3 feet. Small craft advisories here for the North Gulf Coast, easterly winds at 25, picking up to about 30 knots for the Barren Islands, and gales out of the east there for Kachemak Bay, and pretty brisk for the inlet tomorrow. Northeasterlies 25 here in the north to as high as 30 knots south of the Forelands with those seas as high as 8 feet. And moving on to Monday's outlook here, Prince William Sound northeast at about 20 with 4-foot seas. Gales here, North Gulf Coast, east 35 knots, turn northeast 35, and then kick up to 40 knots there for the Barren Islands with 14-foot seas. Kachemak Bay into southern Cook Inlet, we've got north to northeast at 30 knots with 8-foot seas continuing, and northern Cook Inlet 25 out of the northeast. And for the Kodiak Island zones tomorrow, east 25, about sums it up there at 6 to 8-foot seas. South at 25 from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, small craft advisories, and then southwesterlies at 20 knots here for the Pacific side of the peninsula with 25 knots southwest winds on the Bering Sea side and those 14-foot seas. Bristol Bay coming up to 30 knots out of the east with 6-foot seas. And for the outlook for Monday, those winds will turn south and drop off to 20 knots there for Bristol Bay. And small craft advisories continue here for the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty brisk winds, southwest 30 there on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. West turning southwest here up towards Sitkinak at 25 knots. Going north at 25 for Shelikof Strait, and west to east winds there for the east side of Kodiak Island at 30 knots with 12-foot seas. Out over the Fox Islands tomorrow, we've got westerlies 25 to 30 knots there with seas as high as 18 feet. Turning northwest there for Adak and Atka, 25 to 30 knots, and pretty uniform wind from there on out to the west to Shimi and Attu, those seas running 10 to 12 feet. Outlook for Monday, much lighter winds out here in the west now with those winds coming down to 15 knots in the northwest 20, pick up to 25 knots there for the central Aleutians, and 25 to 30 knot winds become mostly sustained 30 knots out of the west across Unalaska Island there with those seas possibly as high as 18 feet. And then for the southwest coast tomorrow southeast, south of Nunivak Island at 30 knots, otherwise east 30 knots from the north side of Nunivak Island up to St. Lawrence there with brisk wind advisories in those zones. Northeast 30 knots there for the northern Bering Sea, and west 30 for the Pribilofs with seas at about 15. And then for the Monday outlook, south 25, turn east, coming down to 20 knots from Nunivak Island, the North Shore, all the way up to St. Lawrence Island. And north 30 for St. Matthew Island, westerlies at 30 knots there with 17-foot seas for the Pribilofs. Up along the Beaufort Sea coast on the east side here, easterlies 30 knots, so brisk wind advisories actually extend all the way to the central coast, drop down to 20 knots there on the west side, down to Cape Thompson, then back into the brisk wind advisory stuff here, Cape Thompson to Wales. And for the outlook for Monday, that continues there, 25 knot easterlies, lighter there from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. Easterly winds 25 to 30 for the remainder of the Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, clear and again 15 below in areas here up over the northeast interior to the Arctic coast with 5 to 10 below over the Copper River Basin. Into the northern Panhandle, northerly winds on the increase. Chance of snow down to the south. Chance of snow increases here for the southwest coast, becoming mixed with rain for the Alaska Peninsula. And jumping ahead to Monday, cold in the north, chance of snow and rain in the south. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.